On this special episode of GTA 5 O'Clock, part 1 of our exclusive interview with Rockstar North President Leslie Benzies. We've got all new info on GTA Online, Rockstar's vision for an online world, the creative tools, the social network, and much, much more. It's another monster exclusive. It's this week's GTA 5 O'Clock. Hi, welcome to part 1 of our exclusive interview with Rockstar North President Leslie Benzies. We were lucky enough to catch up with him during our recent exclusive trip to Rockstar North to see a 50-minute demo of GTA Online. We had an awful lot to ask him, as you'd imagine, so what we've decided to do is split this interview into 2 parts. First part delivered today, second part delivered tomorrow on our YouTube channel, so please don't forget to subscribe and follow us on @GTAV O'Clock for all the latest updates. I'm Dan Dawkins, co-host of GTA 5 O'Clock, and I'm joined today by Tim Weaver. Good day, Tim.
Good day to you indeed, and it is a good day, Dan.
Yeah, it's really exciting finally getting to speak to the guy who's been working on the franchise since inception. He's the president of Rockstar North, very engaging, interesting character, rarely gives press interviews, so I think it was quite special to actually be ushered into his office to speak to him for the first time.
Yeah, I mean, I went back when I was compiling, transcribing this interview and looked at the amount of interviews he'd done, and I could only find about 3 or 4 since he started work as GTA producer on GTA 3. So, now that's what, 12 years ago?
Yeah, over a decade, 3 interviews. So he gives an interview about every 3 years. So you can tell it's a pretty big deal. The only thing that's a bit of a shame is we can't sadly bring you Leslie Benzies' voice. We've recorded it and we've got it, but we can't bring it to you. So we're going to have to speak, and we're not going to put on awful Scottish accents and pretend to be Leslie Benzies. Don't you worry. For all of those who sat through previous episodes where we did brilliant American accents.
Yeah, and I think those seem to go down really well, Dan. So that's probably the reason we're not going to attempt an accent today.
Exactly. And again, as Tim said to me off air, Leslie Benzies' voice sounds a bit like a nice version of Desmond from Lost.
Yeah, I thought he was very Desmond from Lost. A very soothing voice. Like, transcribing it was a pleasure. Very soothing voice.
So I'm doubly sad we can't bring you his voice. And again, I can assure you, particularly those conspiracy theorists out there who always assume that somehow we've invented something, we're certainly not going to invent a 1-hour-long interview with Leslie Benzies.
Yeah.
You can rest assured about that. So, these are all legitimate answers from our sit-down chat with Leslie Benzies. We had, honestly, the best part of an hour to sit and chat with him. It was fantastic. So, yeah, we can get into it.
Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go through all the questions, all the answers, and we're going to stop off at certain points to take a deeper look at what he meant, because some of these answers are pretty big. They lead us into some pretty incendiary places, Dan.
Yeah, there's things that he says that you could probably speculate on what they really mean, and there's things you've got to be careful between what we speculate and what Leslie Benzies said. So I think
we'll make that clear. We'll make
that clear as we go through. But to my fevered mind, and having chased this trail for 9 months, and hopefully GTA 5 O'Clock's got quite a good track record on putting the clues and the evidence together. Let's see how we do with these answers.
Okay, so we sat down in his office. It was a very nice office, Dan. One of the nicest offices I think I've been in. It certainly put yours and my office into context. Not that we really have an office. But
I don't even have an office. No. I've got a desk in the giant room.
He had a couple of air conditioning units going, a scented candle, whiteboard full of ideas and printouts from the game. He had vehicle printouts all over his wall. He also had a TV that was showing live feeds of bug fixes, which I thought was very Wall Street. Yeah,
I mean, I don't want to oversell it, as in he wasn't like on top of a lily on top of the building in some giant, Perspex box. Yeah. It wasn't like that. I mean, he's just got a nice big corner office, as you'd expect of a man who's the president of Rockstar North. Like Tim said, there were huge sort of noticeable humidifier air conditioning units either side of the room. But the big thing was, it really did feel like you were in the controller's office, because he had all these screens running, and on one of the screens was like a giant graph, and it had like a daily bug report on GTA 5, so you could see like they were live testing and crunching the remaining bugs in GTA 5, and it was things like bugs fixed today, bugs remaining, bugs added yesterday, and it was just this giant line graph up and down. You could see where they were like the bug list had been tens of thousands and they crunched it down to only a few hundred, but all the time they were fixing things, they were breaking other things. So you had this like live monitoring thing, and you could also see that like Leslie was rigged up to do some QA himself, and to do some testing. And like Tim said, on the walls they had he had pictures of cars from the game and vehicles. He was clearly immersed in this stuff. And again, there was like, obviously it was funny, he had like a giant Freddy Krueger in the corner of the office.
He did have a giant Freddy Krueger, maybe to scare him into working harder.
Could be.
Could be that. Yeah. Let's face it, probably not. We asked him when we sat down, just as we were setting up our microphones, why he'd let us into, given us the sort of keys to the place, figuratively speaking, why he let us in to see the game now, why into Rockstar North. And he said, and this is a quote, "It's hard to understand what GTA Online is. It's such a new development for us. I thought it best you got the info from the guys here who know." So that kind of backs up, Dan, what we were saying yesterday on the show, that this is a very sort of complex beast, and they want to be very, very clear on exactly what it is.
Yeah, it's like we found yesterday in trying to describe it. It's hard to boil it down to that killer sentence, or if you create a reductive bullet point list, it probably doesn't fully represent the opportunity that GTA Online provides. So I think they were keen to give us as much opportunity to understand it as possible, and also trust in our capacity to explain it. Ha!
Anyway, first question, Dan, we asked was, when did you first start to think about GTA Online, and what was your vision for it? And Leslie said...
He said, "This started when we began making GTA 3. And every single game we've said, right now we're going to do it, now we're going to do it. And I guess we've never felt like we had the manpower or the tech power to do it. Now the time is right, we've got a great engine to work from, and we had the staff to do it."
Okay. Now, yesterday we talked about how quite a few months ago we predicted, based on evidence, that GTA Online would be an MMO style, experience, that it wouldn't be just like a traditional multiplayer. So we said to him, on GTA 5 o'clock, we've been speculating for a while that GTA Online would in fact be an MMO-style experience, and it's exciting to see that's definitely where it's headed. A byproduct of that is that players will be able to create their own missions and reshape the world. Can you expand a little upon that? What did Leslie say, Dan?
Well, he said, let's take a simple example, like a deathmatch. He says, you open up the creator tools, you place all your spawn points. You open up your creators, you open up all your spawn points, place some props, place cars, place planes, place anything you want around the world. He says, when you're happy and you've play tested it, when you're happy to publish, you hit the button. And you send it up to the cloud. That was an interesting bit.
Yeah.
He says, you send it up to the social club cloud. Then it's available for everyone else in the world to use. When they boot their game up, they could pick you up as a preferred creator, and then all of your content will get sucked back into their game. It's constantly evolving. Everybody creates things. You choose whose content you want to see. You set up a blue marker, and that's kind of like the instigator for the mission. You walk in there, and then it triggers whatever you've created. And that will constantly be evolving, so we'll be creating content all the time. Every day you'll boot up the game, and there'll be new things coming in.
That's interesting. So new things every day. Do you think he means that from day one, or do you think they'll give you like a couple of weeks grace?
I would expect, given that they're waiting 2 weeks to launch GTA Online, I think GTA Online will be fairly static from their point of view for a week or two. I don't think they'll be like constantly hitting you with new material from them from the off. I think they'll have quite a robust set of tools, items to buy, incentives, missions, various different things. I think that, again, we know that the ability for us to create stuff will probably be there from the off, and at a quite rudimentary level.
Yeah, I mean, he goes on in the next one, actually. We asked him, but the tools of the creator won't be available at the start. And he said, initially, you'll be able to create races and death matches, which are probably the simplest. And then over time, when we feel comfortable that people are ready to get the new creators, they will be released. So it will be a trickle, but it will be a constant release of new creators and new content. We don't want to overdo it. It's a complex system. That's another reason for the 2-week delay between single player and online. We want to give people an opportunity to actually get their head around what's happened, because even single player is a big advancement from the old games. There's a lot of new things to learn. So that suggests like you say, a version of the creator will be there day one, but it'll be super, super simple.
Yeah, and they're going to build on it. One thing to point out, actually, I meant to say, if you're interested in the pure text of this interview, head to computerandvideogames.com, where we've got like a full transcription of the interview, which might be slightly easier to follow. What we're doing here is kind of analysing what Leslie said and the feeling of the experience and what we felt from being in the room.
Yeah. Okay, so next we said to him, so you could, in theory, have launched the creator at the same time. And he said, we could, but we want it to be known as a different entity, a separate thing, and it will grow on its own. It will be GTA Online. It's not part of GTA 5. Obviously, it's set in the GTA 5 engine, but it's going to grow and evolve into its own thing. And then I think you asked, Dan, after 2 weeks, how will people get access to it?
And he says, when it launches, you'll have an extra character on your switch wheel. That's your character switch wheel. Instead of choosing Franklin, Michael, or Trevor, you'll select your multiplayer character and you'll be sucked straight in there.
So your multiplayer avatar will appear after 2 weeks?
Yes, said Leslie Benzies.
There won't be any other download required?
Leslie said, there may be a tiny download, but it will only be a code. We've just got to figure out how that will work with Sony and Microsoft.
Okay, so quite a lot of interesting stuff in there, Dan. Especially, I mean, we alluded to it yesterday on the show about how they're very, very keen to keep GTA 5 and GTA Online as separate entities.
Yeah, exactly that. And as we said, the fact they released 2 weeks apart is a key part of that. My initial thinking was, how's this going to work? Are you going to have to download like a giant hundreds of gig file or something from a distant server to make it work? And it sounds like no, it's there. It's sort of like you've got GTA Online, the core code, but you have to get an activation code, which might be a mini download, which just opens it up, and then the servers are go and it's active. So there's no trickery there. It's just they're just waiting 2 weeks to get it up online.
Okay, so next we started sort of probing him on how exactly the GTA Online experience begins. We asked him, when you first start playing online, will you have anything to start with? Any stats that will carry over from the single-player game? And he looked a bit uncertain. He said, I'm not sure. And then he looked over at the PR guy who was with us and said, are we talking a bit about creator stuff? And then the PR guy chipped in and said something interesting. Yeah,
we said something interesting, I think, because they're saving, I presume, a little bit of creator chat for later in the campaign.
Yeah.
And given that, there's not that many days till GTA 5 comes out, that stuff could be out there really imminently. But what he said was, there's a character creation system, so you'll create a new character to start with. But no, none of your stats as the three guys in GTA 5 will carry over. Again, this speaks to the difference between the two, as in between GTA 5 and GTA Online. The world of Grand Theft Auto Online is set slightly before the events of GTA 5, and so while it shares some of its experiences and it shares characters, the stats are separate.
Leslie then chipped in and said, they're all separate, yeah. Each character has his own set of stats, and as you create your character, depending on what you're creating, your stats will be different. So, of course, then we asked, will Michael, Trevor and Franklin... Michael, Trevor and Franklin don't exist within GTA Online. At which point he said...
Yeah, he sort of laughed and tried to, pretend the question hadn't happened to an extent and just said, we've got to be careful for story spoilers. And it was essentially a lockdown.
Yeah.
So, my speculation here, this is not Leslie Benzies saying, this is me, based on what was really an obvious reaction.
Yeah.
They're almost certainly in GTA Online in some context.
Yeah.
Or certainly some of them are. And as we'll talk about in a minute, it seems like characters from within the GTA 5 single-player world will appear to you in GTA Online to introduce you to the GTA Online experience and give you effectively tutorials.
Yeah. I sort of think one of the important distinctions to make is that they have said very clearly that GTA 5 and GTA Online are two separate entities, but here we are saying that there will be characters from GTA 5 in GTA Online. But what you've got to think about in terms of GTA Online is that it is literally the building block. It's the foundation of where this experience is going to go. So the fact that it's got probably Michael, Trevor and Franklin in it and has other characters from GTA 5 introducing shouldn't make you think that they're the same experience. Sure, they share very different, very similar, a very exactly similar map and similar characters, but GTA Online will become something much, much bigger over time, whereas GTA 5 will stay as it is.
GTA 5 is kind of like the world and its mechanics are the springboard from which GTA Online will be launched, and it will become a different thing as time develops, and in fact you will find out much more about that from Les in just a minute.
Okay, so then we said to Leslie, when you start GTA Online, you presumably begin with no money. So what are your first steps in the game to get things moving?
Yeah, and he said, in traditional GTA style, you'll be taking on a journey through the first few missions of the game, just to give you a feel for it. He says, we'll have the usual Rockstar help to keep you on the straight and narrow all the way through. So it'll be a nice, hopefully well-paced introduction to the game. There's a lot for people to learn, so we don't want to just throw you into the world. You're not just going to go in and start playing death matches.
At which point the PR guy came in and he said, you can also say, he's talking to Leslie at this point, you can also say that characters from GTA 5 will introduce you to the experiences of GTA Online. You'll meet characters from single player who will introduce you to things in the same way as they do in single player. So, for example, someone will say to you, here's ammunition, here's where you can get weapons. And then Leslie picked up again and said...
he just said it's got a flow like a single player game has a flow, so there's a progression through some things. It's not a story, but there is a progression through online. It's a different type of flow.
Then we asked, at the end of the demo, you mentioned that players are ranked on performance and everything is tracked. What kinds of things will players be ranked on?
Leslie said, it depends on the type of mission. A deathmatch will score differently to a race, which will score differently from what we saw today, which will score differently from any other mode. So it just depends on what kind of mode it is. But we do have an internal score that we hold that can rank people. It encompasses things like shooting, driving, flying, parachuting, so we can tell where people exist within the overall leaderboard.
And is that just for internal use, or will players be able to see that information?
It says there's enough data for people to know exactly where they stand within all of their skills and stats.
Okay, so it's worth just freezing on that a little bit.
Yeah.
At the end of a deathmatch, end of a race, end of any part, anything you do in the world will be backed by stats. And as your stats accrue, that ties into reputation points, and reputation points are what as we discovered yesterday, are what the sort of building blocks of this world. And it sounds from what we saw in the demo and what he's talking about here that it will really pay to sort of specialise within the world, because that then gives you like a real advantage in teaming up with people and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, I guess there's lots of different ways to look at it. As in, essentially, people will be looking at your reputation points and your cash, and then probably diving down a layer to say, hey, what vehicles and weapons does this guy have access to? But it might even be possible to search by very tiny increments in data. So, for example, I may not have the highest RP points, but maybe I've got like the highest headshot percentage of anyone in the GTA universe.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah.
So it's stuff like that. So it might be possible to be the king in some metrics, but not being seen as a big overall. Again, like a football player who's like, say, obscenely brilliant at dribbling, but rubbish at defending and heading or something. You will have these different attributes, and it should be possible using the social club online stat systems to see all of this data. And as we know from previous GTAs, you always get a brilliant, exhaustive list of things you've done within the world. It'd be like distance cover, distance driven, people killed, favourite weapon, all that stuff that exists in single player GTA games that tracks should pull across to online.
Yeah. You mentioned social club there, Dan, which is quite tiny, because we did go on to ask him afterwards. Do you have any plans for people to gain access to that data when they're not necessarily tied to those consoles, for example, on an iPad or a phone?
Now, Leslie said everything's available through the social club, which is like Rockstar's website, social club website. He said social club pages will work through iPhones and iPads. So then we clarified.
So no plans for specific apps?
Leslie said, he thinks if the social club pages are written well enough, then you don't really need a specific app. He says they'll be written so they work on Android and iOS and all the devices. You'll be able to get all your stats that way. He says it's a bit fiddlier on iPhone, but it's all available.
Okay.
So I guess essentially they're not. What he's saying is, this is my interpretation of it, they're not building a specific social club stat tracking app as things stand, but all the stats are available on the website.
Yeah. Okay, so moving on, we said as you complete missions, you also showed that you can share your winnings. Have you found, as you've played it, that certain types of personality have developed because of that? That people are willing to become the bad guy?
Leslie said, well, of course. He said, even in a race, you've got the people who will happily clip your back end as you start a race to get you out of it. He says, well, some guys might help you. He says, so definitely there's going to be lots of different types of players. I guess the tricky thing with online is keeping all these players in the same world and not having them mess with each other too much. So we've got some really good cheater management, some bad sport management to make sure everybody's behaving themselves.
We were going to ask how you prevent it becoming like Lord of the Flies. And Leslie said, with a lot of these things, we don't see the problems until we actually sit in a big session and play. We've got a thing called passive mode. If you're spawning and being killed immediately, go to passive mode. It means you can't shoot people, but they can't shoot you. So you can just kind of hang around and get to grips with the game. And actually, we mentioned passive mode on yesterday's show, and that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think if you're new to the GTA Online environment and you're scared that like everyone there is driving like a Sabre with twin Uzis and doing all these different things, and you're going to be like a constant target for a shooting or a mugging or various things, don't worry, because you can kind of tune out of the world in terms of the combat. Just go about learning its mechanics and getting used to being in the online space. So it's a nice tutorial. I also wanted to say, for people who don't know what Lord of the Flies is, it's a book where kids go to an island without structure or society, and things rapidly, well, after a briefly utopian moment, turn to madness.
Yeah.
And they all go mad and start chasing each other, and it's all really divisive. And it's what happens when people are left to their own devices without society or structure, really.
Yeah. Okay, so then we asked him, a lot of what we saw in the demo today appeared to be team-based or versus AI. Will there be much direct head-to-head player combat?
Yes, this is what Leslie said. They were tricky to show in the format we showed you today, and that's in the demo we discussed on yesterday's show.
Yeah.
And Leslie said, I think we all know what kind of style they come in, so yes, all the traditional stuff is there, plus a bunch of new modes.
Okay, what would you extrapolate out from that, he means?
Well, the obvious thing is death matches.
Yeah.
You know, you're going to get death matches, and I think it would be possible to scale them in different ways. So it might be like 4v4, crew versus crew. It might be every man for himself. It could be, and you've got to look at something like Max Payne for clues, really.
Yeah.
Timed matches. It could be specific weapon set matches. It might be set location matches. Again, like I think all the hints about good ways to do competitive multiplayer are in Max Payne. Max Payne does a really good thing as well, where there's like death matches, successive death matches, where it'll like seamlessly bump you from one scenario to the next, accruing the score as you go. I think there'll be lots of that consecutive deathmatch stuff. So there's lots of different ways they can go, and this is without even going into the realm of, hey, if Rockstar don't build it, we can.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of stuff. It's really hard to get a handle on at the moment.
Then we said, you also showed how if you're carrying a lot of cash and then die, that money then spills onto the streets, so there's a big risk carrying cash around.
And he said, yeah, of course. He said, you want to be visiting the bank a lot. So, he says, do you want to do this job with 50 grand, or do you want to go to the bank and just take 5 grand with you? It's another little gameplay element. And again, we discussed a few of the scenarios around this on yesterday's show, but yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that it would be inherently risky to walk around with all your money in your pocket, but conversely, it would be quite pimp to go online and say openly and broadcast it, I am carrying $1 million, and there's no chance any of you are going to get it off me, and I invite you to try.
Yeah.
And again, you may not even actually have that money. Maybe you could perform a psych job. I don't know if you can hide the money you're holding or not, but it's that bravado thing, that bragging, that big player talk of like, I've got all the money, you're never going to get it. It's just another great fun dynamic built into the game.
Sort of tied into the bank stuff, and we talked about this yesterday, is the car insurance. And we asked him, you can also insure cars now, so that if someone steals it or blows it up, you can get that same car back for a premium. You can also leave your car somewhere in the world and come back to that place, and they're still there.
And Leslie said, we don't let anyone steal your personal vehicle. He says, if we were in a personal vehicle and I jumped out as the owner, you could take it. But if it's locked, it's locked. You could blow it up if you're that way inclined, but anything that's going to annoy other players, we will punish you by giving what's known as a bad sports stat. So we store how you behave in there. If you're too bad, you will be punished. So I guess, yeah, some sort of like Batman Joker style nihilist who wanted to go around just watching the world burn wouldn't be that welcome.
No.
I don't think.
No. And in fact, we asked then, can other players see when someone has a bad sports stat? And Leslie said, yeah, they'll be able to check it out and think, I'm not playing with that guy. Which is good. I mean, because, you know, in a world where there is the possibilities to kind of get together and really take on a massive heist when there's, you know, like 8 of you or whatever, that's good. You don't want people, like you say, destroying the kind of feel of a shared experience.
Yeah. So then he said, we asked, so going back to the vehicles, are you almost more encouraged to buy them than to steal them?
To which he said, you can buy cars just like you can in the real world, or you can steal them if the mod shops are prepared to dabble with them. If they are, you can spray them and change the plates. If they're not prepared to do that, when the cops spot you in a stolen car, you'll get a wanted level.
And then we asked, is this why you'd want to employ the $50 a day man to mod your stolen cars? Now, we talked about yesterday going to a garage that you can buy as part of a property. Now, as part of that garage, you can actually employ like an on-site head of staff or like a mechanic who will look after your cars for you. Now, again, we'll go into more detail as we talk, but this guy can do things like automatically repair your cars while you're not around, or just get them ready for you for drop-off and stuff.
He'll also drive them out to you. As Leslie says here, he says he won't deal with stolen cars. All he does is repair busted-up vehicles and deliver your car. So, if you're out in the countryside without transport, you can give him a phone and he'll come out and drop the car off for you. And that's kind of what we were talking about in yesterday's show when we had that kind of a bit of the demo where there was a 2-seater car. There were 3 of them out in the sticks. The driver of the car said, hey, come over here. And his mate said, can you give me a lift back? And he was like, yeah, no problem. And then flipped in the bird. And then they left that guy in the middle of the sticks there with no vehicle. This is, you know, you can call up your mod man and he'll drive your vehicle.
It's so exciting, the idea of, like, let's say, like, Tim and I we've just come down from Mount Chiliad, we've done some base jumping, we're walking down, we get to the base of Mount Chiliad, we're all tired. Tim's like, I'm not getting a taxi or, you know, walking back into Los Santos. And I'll go, don't worry, I'll call my man. And then, like, after a little wait, he rocks up in, like, let's say, a customised flame-lit Patriot with my face on it. And he presses the horn and it plays La Cucaracha or something, or the Welsh national anthem. You know, and again, if then I could press my custom animation to do like a moonwalk or something and go, let's get in my car, players!
Yeah.
You know, or something more authentic. That would be amazing. The scope for showing off and just being the big man in this virtual world is great. I love it. You know, that's such good fun.
Okay, so next we said we saw switches of camera angles as you were driving in the demo. That's all still manually controlled.
Yeah, he said manually controlled. Remember in GTA 4 you had all these cinematic cameras and you could flick the stick up and down to change the modes? He said all that stuff and an expanded version of that is in GTA 5 and in GTA Online.
Which is when we said, so with that in mind, is there any plans to give people the opportunity to record, edit and share videos they've made?
This is really interesting. I'm going to start off with some of my speculation. I've previously said on the show, you know, Rockstar would potentially let you record your footage, edit it, share it in a sort of YouTube fashion. Now, they are thinking down these lines, but it sounds like they're not there quite yet. So it's interesting. I feel like we've done the right thought work, but maybe the technical reality isn't there. But what he said, I thought was fascinating. So Leslie said, a dream of ours is when you finish the game, you press a button and it's made a film of your game. He says maybe one day, you know, this could happen. It depends on a lot of things. And so almost in disbelief, I'd said, it sounds just too complex. Like, just that's something that can't happen, pressing a button to make a film of your 70-hour game. And he said, no, not really. It's all doable.
And he had a little smile on his... I remember he clearly had a little smile on his face then, so I don't know whether that's it's all doable in the near future smile or a wistful, it's all doable at some point in the future when the technology catches up. Either way, it's exciting.
Yeah,
the idea of it is exciting.
It's incredible.
Okay, so next we said, how is Weasel News going to work online? Weasel News being, of course, the news channel, in-game news channel we talked about on yesterday's show. You showed news feeds of fellow players escaping from the cops. Are we going to have the ability to share them?
He says you don't share them. All you can do at the moment is watch the feeds when people have wanted levels from your apartment. It doesn't get fed out anywhere else.
It'll just pick the people who are currently on wanted levels?
And Leslie said it'll pick your friends, crew members, people who've got wanted levels. Yeah, that's what it'll do.
Okay, then we said, what sort of money can you earn from missions?
Leslie said the money in the game is one of those things that has to be very finely balanced, and we're still working on it. He says if I was to give you a number, it would probably change tomorrow. I guess they're tuning a real world economy essentially.
Yeah.
So then he says because you're buying properties and you're buying cars and you're earning money, you need to make sure that fits in with the flow. It'll change. He says but we try and base everything on real life. So imagine the kind of sums you would get in real life for doing a job. If you're robbing a store, you're going to get a couple of $100, $300. If you're nicking a car, you're going to get 1,000, 2,000, depending on the car. We're basing it on what happens out there.
We said, we saw in the recent gameplay trailer that you could invest in stocks and shares as well. Will you be able to do that too in GTA Online?
Yeah, this is where the top of my head flipped off and steam emitted because it's just so incredible. He said, yep, you can go online, you can buy shares in a car company, target that company's cars, blow them up so the insurance will replace them and the stock price will go up. He says everything's tied in exactly the same way as it is in single player.
Amazing. So we said to him, so you could, as an online group, organise into cartels?
He said you could, yeah. But he says, of course, there's the government, as in us, Rockstar, who has to make sure there's nothing untoward happening.
Which is comforting. It sounds like they're really going to be on top of this and making sure that while people can be inventive and have fun and use the creators and the world and reshape it how they want, at the same time, they're not going to let that kind of fun be spoiled.
What I really like about it is almost as a piece of social dynamics, as an experiment, is that they're creating a microeconomy that will run by presumably the supply and demand rules within GTA Online. Other online games, MMOs like, let's say, EVE Online, actually hired their own economists to study the economy within it. And I think it's possible that GTA will reach a similar stage, and there'll be all sorts of fascinating stats about what people are spending their money on, what's popular. Again, they'll be effectively the 1%, I think, of GTA Online, much like there is in reality. Like people who cane it really hard, and that's my 1% alarm going off there. People who cane the game really hard and play it might be like whales, effectively, who just not land of whales, but whales, like the terminology. People who play the game so much and search so much cash, they're like the Moby Dicks of this universe, where they've got so much money you can't believe it. They almost pass through like a Russian oligarch, like a ghost. I just think all that side of the game, the sociology of it and the economic model of it is brilliant and fascinating.
Okay, so then we moved on and said to him, can you give us a steer on the geography of that last mission? For people who listened to the show yesterday, they will know that is where where Rockstar stole a Titan from Los Santos Airport, flew it up all the way up to an airstrip near Sandy Shores. We said it looked like the player came along Vespucci Beach along the western coast, and it looked like there was another previously unseen town on the western edge.
Yeah, this is all really interesting. We touched on this yesterday. Leslie Benzies said, you didn't see the map, and that wasn't all of the map. You saw a bit of city, you saw some countryside, and there's a whole other chunk of map. And he says, the airfield that you ended up is where the plane in the first demo took off from. He says it's a big... And the first demo, I presume he's referring to the gameplay demo we saw?
Yeah, I think he's referring to where Franklin jumps out of the chopper.
Yeah.
What's the word I'm looking for? Parachutes down.
Yeah.
And then just off to our right, was it, Dan? A plane was taken off from a military base.
Yeah, and that's all been, again, documented on a previous episode. Go back and seek it out for our, first preview of it. And then he said, sorry, Tim, you can continue.
No, he just said a big military plane. In fact, it was the same plane that we stole today. So the plane that we stole from the airport in this mission in GTA Online is the same plane we saw taking off from the military base in that very first gameplay demo we saw up at Rockstar. Leslie goes on to say that's what Franklin looked at in that demo when he was parachuting.
Yeah, nice touch. So then this is where like we started asking more specific questions based on what we know of the map. So we said, and we landed next to the Alamo Sea in that last mission.
At which point Leslie didn't respond. Instead, the PR guy chipped in and said, "Yep, it was in Blaine County."
And then we said, and via the Zancudo River.
And the PR guy again stepped in and said, "We're not going to get too specific." But then Leslie said, "You guys know your shit. You saw a bit of a map and there's a lot more going on. There's a lot of toys out there and a lot of areas for people to use to make their missions," which suggests that the maps that we've, the map we've put on the show and the kind of geography is pretty that much there.
So it suggests that like the maps we've shown are correct. It shows a lot of the great community mapping work, especially on GTA forums, is correct. And we were able to reel off to Rockstar their own game, which was quite nice.
Yeah.
Obviously they know more about their own game than us.
Yeah. We actually just asked them a question about map size as well, because obviously we still do get quite a few people on the comments saying that the map's not that big. We said we still get a lot of feedback from people saying the map isn't that big, and Leslie said it's big and the level of detail in there is ridiculous. It's really quite impressive what the artists have managed to do to squeeze it all onto this machine.
It only echoes what we've said on previous shows when asked about the size of the map. I'd be so amazed if people are upset about what they're getting from GTA 5. Like, I really do think it's not just the pure physical scale of the environments. It's the detail, it's the richness, it's the undersea. It's every building has got a different thing to admire. It's incredible. Okay, so that's part one of our interview with Leslie Benzies. Tune back tomorrow for part two, which is equally, if not more, fascinating, where Leslie talks broadly about the future for GTA Online, and I guess hinting at the future of the entire series, with a couple of revelations that had me sort of squeezing the seat quite tightly. So yeah, do subscribe, do follow on at GTAV o'clock. Thank you so much for listening, and we look forward to hearing and speaking to you tomorrow.